Good afternoon. We're sitting here with Dave Passoff as part of our oral history interview series. Today's date is January 22nd, 2025. Mr. Passoff, can you please introduce yourself and give us a little background about...
Okay, my name is Dave Passoff. I've been living here in Great Neck since 1952, okay? And my family, which composes of three brothers and my mom and dad, we were here since that time period. We lived in the Baker Hill section of Great Neck. I went to E.M. Baker School from grades K through 6, and then went also to North Middle School, okay, which was North Junior High School at the time, and then graduated in 1969 from North Senior High School, okay. But I lived in Great Neck and I've worked in Great Neck. And as a child, we were participating in Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, PBC activities, which is called the Police Boys Club at the time, okay, which later became, down the line, the PAL, which is now known as the PAL in Great Neck, okay. And the reason for the change was there was a lawsuit brought by a parent while the organization was called Police Boys Club. It was Nassau County Police Boys Club, and then the Police Boys Club then became PAL, became an affiliate of the National PAL, and still does the same sports and everything else. I was a volunteer for that organization from junior high school all the way up through high school into college, okay? And I started a judo program with the PAL, okay? During that time, and I used various venues within Great Neck, mostly the school system, and I also was a volunteer in several different schools, and I was employed by the Great Neck's public school system, okay, as a volunteer, well, during my college time, because I was studying to be a school teacher at that time. So I volunteered in Kensington Johnson School, I volunteered the rec nights at Great Neck South and Great Neck North. All right, and I just was basically a volunteer. I was not a volunteer, but I was a paid employee of the Great Neck school system during that period of time. All right, through PAL and PBC, I started the judo program here in Great Neck one night a week, and then I had another community program in two other communities in Nassau County. All right, and essentially we got other clubs together, and we used to have small tournaments or small workouts together. And basically, that ended in Great Neck as the community began to change, all right? Less kids wanted to do judo and they wanted to do karate or some other activities. So I left the program about maybe 5 years ago in 2020, and I moved to Nassau County PAL, which is out in Hicksville. So I had Hicksville, Syosset, Jericho, and Plainview, all right? But now the program is now guided in Hicksville, and is strictly a program for it's a county-wide program, all right? I was also affiliated with the Boy Scouts. I was affiliated with Pack and Troop 446 in Great Neck. I attained the rank of Eagle Scout during that period of time. I went through the whole scouting activity, and we had a nice amount of people within the pack and within also the troop, okay? And we went on different camping trips, you know, upstate New York, around West Point, Bear Mountain State Park. Also went out to Philmont Scout Ranch, which is out in New Mexico. And we had a cross-country trip from New York to Philmont, okay, which enticed about 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks in Philmont itself, hiking through the San Cristobal Range in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico, all right? And I went through that, and then went to college at Rockland Community College, starting in 1970, graduated from high school in 1969, and was based up there, but I would come down here to run the program once a week, okay? I also taught at West Point, the West Point Judo Club, cadets, and also dependent judo club, okay? And at that time I was up there for like 3 years, and came back down after the 3 years, and I started going to college at CW Post, LIU, all right? And I still kept on teaching judo throughout that time, as well as taking courses. I got my bachelor's degree in both criminology and special education at that time from CW Post LIU, and I got my master's in both those two subjects as well. All right. Otherwise, I've been running a program. Now live in Queens at the present time, and I have my son who is now he works out in Hauppauge, New York, and we have a house in Coram, New York. Okay. So basically, I'm a single parent. Okay, with an adoptive child, and he's been with me ever since he was 9 years old, and that's it. So basically living in Great Neck at that time, during the time that I went to school in Great Neck, through public school, meaning K through 6, and junior and senior high school, it was a very diverse neighborhood. It became very diverse back in the 60s when segregation came into effect. We never had any type of Hispanic or African American students in the school at all up until the 60s. And then all of a sudden, there was an influx of African American and Hispanic students coming into the school system at that time due to segregation laws and everything else that happened. There was no incidents, no big incidents of like discrimination or hassles with, between blacks and whites or Hispanics within that area. Asians began to come in as well at that time, but it was mostly a very white, middle-class neighborhood, mostly Jewish. There were series of areas down there, Memorial Field around the high school area that were mostly, Italian, Irish areas, okay? And there was no hassles between that because everybody pretty much got along, all right? There were no cliques. There was cliques in school like anybody else has cliques in school, okay? But basically, as a population, it was very diverse, all right? Teachers were good, had a good education. I had 2 other brothers. I'm the oldest of 3 brothers, okay? We were involved in high school sports. All 3 of us were in high school sports. I was the only one that was really interested in the scouting part. My other 2 brothers were more interested in hockey and swimming and everything else, where I was more interested in outdoor stuff. My father was a scoutmaster for a period of time, then left that, and he was also he worked in the garment industry at that time. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a short period of time, then took the various accounting jobs. She went to school for accounting, bookkeeping at Nassau Community College, and then she had different jobs along the way, all right? Basically, my mom and dad separated at that time when I was about 13, 14 years old, and my father lived in Queens and my mom lived here in Great Neck, all right? And basically, I left Great Neck when I was about 19 years of age. And I started going up to college at that time, and I spent some time overseas during the summers, and I played judo in Europe. I played judo in Japan for part of the summers so that I was away, and I would come back and I would still keep teaching, okay? And I lived in different locations in and around Nassau County. I never lived in Great Neck after I left. About when I was 19, I haven't lived in Great Neck since I was 19, okay? So I lived in different parts of Nassau County at that time, along with other people, room shared and everything else like that while I was going to college. Once I started going to college, I lived in Queens, right over the border of Great Neck, and then resumed from there, okay? But otherwise, right now, I'm living in Queens, and I have a residence, like I mentioned earlier, out in Long Island, out in Coram, Long Island.
What were some of your favorite spots that you went to when you were in the Scouts in Great Neck?
Basically, we went to we spent some time in Kings Point Park doing some like little day hikes and little camping things. Okay, mostly we didn't do anything in Great Neck proper. There was a campsite in Roslyn, New York. Okay, it was called Harkness Training Center, which had a little campground. Which we had on occasion 2 days a week. We would hike out from Great Neck to the Harkness Training Center, which is the Boy Scout Training Center, and do a day hike and stay overnight, do a little camping, and then come back because it was developed that way. All right, it's now composed of a whole mess of houses out there now. Okay, there's no training site at all. So we were big into Scouts, and there were other scouting troops and packs that we affiliated ourselves with. There was Troop 10 here in Great Neck as well as Troop 446. Same thing with PAC, in the Cub Scout line. It was PAC 10, PAC 446. Okay, so we dissolved pretty much because most of the people that I was in with 446 either left Great Neck altogether or just left the scouting community altogether, okay? And Troop 10 is now, I think, active or might be inactive, I'm not sure if they are or not, in the Great Neck area, okay? The same thing with the PAC, the same thing with the Cub Scouts, all right? Go ahead.
So, what are the names of your parents?
Okay, Albert and Lila Passoff.
And what were the names of your brothers?
Jan Passoff and Michael Passoff.
And I also wanted to know do you know what brought what made your family decide to settle in?
My
Great Neck?
grandfather lived in Kings Point,
What was his name?
Lou Gutstein. Okay, now Lou Gutstein, where Temple Emmanuel is right now in Great Neck, which is like right on the cusp of Village of Great Neck and Kings Point, okay, on that area where Temple Emmanuel is presently, okay, he owned that whole property. And he went horseback riding all the time. He had a farm there and everything else.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Oh, that was, I think, when I was like between grades 4 and 7, okay? When I was around that age group. So we would actually use horses and go into town. We would, by horse, not by, we were allowed to do that. Nobody hassled us. The cops never hassled. And we would just get what we wanted to get and come back to the house and, we'd go around the area because it was a large area, like I said earlier, right? So the area is large enough to take a little trot around the area. And we took care of the horses. On occasion, we would ride our bikes because I lived on Hartley Road, which is maybe about 3 or 4 blocks away from that area. Okay, go Hartley, Wimbledon, out to Hicks Lane, and then on to his house, right? So we'd take the bikes over there, right? And we would just hang around the farm and do some farming and horseback riding.
Do you remember the house, the address of the house that you
No,
grew
I
up
don't
in?
remember, but it's the same site. There's 3 houses on that site now. Temple Emmanuel is part of that. The parking lot of Temple Emmanuel, the rear parking lot. Plus there's 2 or 3 other houses on that site alone. Because he had passed away when I was like maybe 8th grade, 9th grade. He passed away and the property was sold. Okay?
Do you remember the street name?
It was Hicks Lane, not Hicks. Fairview, it's between Fairview and Hicks Lane. Between Fairview Avenue and Hicks Lane. I pass it by all the time, and the house is still there, okay, but it's pushed into the side. I usually sometimes sneak up into the driveway and just take a look at the house. But I mean, you wouldn't know there's a farm there, because everything's been demolished. The horseback riding area, plus the barn and all the other stuff has been demolished, from the other houses, and the parking lot. So it took up all that area. My brothers were also the same way. I had a paper route for about 4 years when I was a kid, from 12 to about delivered Newsday to about 35, 40 customers, and made a small living that way. Okay.
How long was your route?
The route was about maybe an hour a day, plus 7 days a week. Okay.
What were the streets that you went to?
The route consisted of Hartley Road, Baker Hill, all the way up through Station Road, down up until Memorial Field, which is a huge route, okay? And I had about 35 customers, and by the time I left the route and gave it up to Newsday, I had 50 customers.
Do you remember what your pay was at that time?
$10 a week, which was a lot of money.
So also,
and we used to go down, at that time, there was no Friendlies or anything, there was no fast food places in Great Neck, and that part of Great Neck, the village of Great Neck I'm talking about. So you went down to the stationery store, you went down to the, where the CVS is now. It used to be a colony luncheon area, okay? A couple of Chinese restaurants down there. There was no Dunkin' Donuts at that time, there was a Carvel at that time, okay? In that area, so there was different things that don't exist anymore, obviously, in here. Went to the movie theater a lot, Playhouse and Squire, that doesn't exist anymore, okay? But we used to go there on occasion for movies, during the weekend. And
where was that located?
that was located on Middle Neck Road, in Midtown, in the plaza, in Great Neck Plaza.
What were some of the movies you remember seeing there?
All the monster movies, How the West Was Won, the Frankenstein movies, everything. We used to go to the matinees every Saturday.
So did you?
The Saturday matinees were cheap. I mean, in comparison. So like $2 or $3 to get in, you know?
So what were some of the favorite stores you went to while you were in Great Neck? And also, I remember you, I think you told me in the past that you've met some famous people. One of them was Sid Caesar. If you
Sid
could tell us
Caesar's
more
kids,
about
Sid
that.
Caesar and Alan King's children went to school with me during our class time. I mean, we weren't friends, but they were in the same class as I was in. A couple of people who were not really, those are the people that were had notoriety. There was a distinct clique between the Kings Point kids, because I went to Great Neck North, and the kids that didn't go to, were not in Kings Point. Okay? It's a distinct difference. You know, when you started driving to school, you saw a distinct difference in cars and everything else, and clothing and all that kind of stuff, right? So when I was in Great Neck North, I tried out for the wrestling team. I was part of BAA, which is Boys Athletic Association. I was a member of BAA. And I was tried out for the football team at one time, but I messed up my knees, okay, so I couldn't go out for football, all right? And my other brothers were more active in swimming and hockey, and that's it. And I was mostly an intramural player when I was doing, intramurals in Great Neck, for the Great Neck public schools. As a student, I was an average student. I was not like a high up student. I really didn't like school. I was not a school person. Okay? And I was a heavy set guy. I mean, the height I am now is what height I was in when I was in 8th grade. So I was a big, pudgy guy, all right? And I fit in a little bit, but I was teased a lot because I was tall. Everybody thought I got left back because I was taller than they were, and I was heavier, so they thought I was being high school when I was really a junior high school student. So in that respect, there was hassles here and there with people, all right? But nothing, nothing outrageous, And my other two brothers were more active than I was socially with them, with their other friends, with their, and basically they, like I said, they took part in different activities around the Great Neck area. The same way I did, like when the Parkwood did open up, one of my brothers, my younger brother was a hockey player, he liked skating and liked hockey. And he also liked swimming. Okay, my middle brother was the same way. He didn't like hockey, but he liked swimming, so he joined the swimming team at that time when he was in school. And my other brother was more into that. I went out for track one time, track and field, and I threw the shot put for about 2 years for Great Neck North, junior high school, not high school, okay? And, there was a lot of activity on the athletic fields, at that time, between North and South. It was a big, big hassle between North and South, and, went to a lot of games, backed up a lot of people, that type of thing, right? We were active in the community. My parents were active in the community. Both were active in the community as, in the Scouts, drama club, that type of thing. My mom was into drama big time, so she was into a community drama group, okay? And they used to use the schools, to do their plays in the evening, on the weekends. So, my brothers and I would help the drama club up by acting in the background, doing stage managing stuff and stuff like that.
What were some of the performances?
That I can't recollect those, okay? But I mean, I'm just, basically, the one I recollect is Guys and Dolls, okay? When it first came out in Broadway, we did a replication, well, that drama program did, the adults did a replication of Guys and Dolls, okay? And some of the kids were, beds on the background, doing all kinds of stuff in the background with the scenery and everything else like that. So we did backstage stuff, okay? My brothers were less involved than I was, but, I helped out because I was the oldest, all right? But basically, that's basically everything, worked out. Everybody had friends. We had friends over. We went to other friends' houses. You were able at that time to ride bikes all over the place, play stickball on the street, okay? And have catches and play basketball and all that kind of stuff on the street. You didn't have to worry about all that stuff. Sometimes we closed off the street on our own, okay? The cops would come by and say, you can't do that. And Then when they left, we put the barriers back up again. That was it, Go
Did you
ahead.
have a favorite place to eat that you remember?
There was a place called Squires, which is like a restaurant, similar to like Ben's, equivalent to what Ben's was here. It was called Squires at the time, okay? And it was like a small diner. It right around, I'm trying to think where it would be. It was right around in the old village where the CVS is right now, in the old village, opposite the Bagel Hut and around that area, off of Baker Hill Road, around that area, okay? And like I said, there was very little tension between people because you had a large amount of Jewish people between the Kings Point group and, you know, the people who lived right, let's say, by St. Al's Church around that area, okay? And there was no hassles at all. Everybody just got along. Everybody went to school. There was very few hassles because, you know, you were Jewish and this person was Catholic. There was none of that. And the same thing when, like I said, African American children came in, students came in rather, okay? You didn't have that problem. Most of those people put themselves, because of the amount of money it cost you to buy a house, most people rented along Steamboat Road. So that group of people that came in, who came into Great Neck as Hispanic or African American, lived along Steamboat Road all the way down to the Merchant Marine Academy, like on the cusp of Great Neck, Village Great Neck into Kings Point, okay, but didn't go into Kings Point. You know, the houses were just in that area. That area is now taken up by, it was like right by Kings Point Park, like near the entrance to Kings Point Park along Steamboat Road, okay? And there was a lot of activity at the Merchant Marine Academy. I've taught at the Merchant Marine Academy for 3 years. I taught judo at the Merchant Marine Academy for 3 years. After college, right after college, I taught for 3 years, and it was mostly students, and I taught some law enforcement, Coast Guard law enforcement people at that time also in the class.
Where at the Merchant Marine Academy?
In the academy itself, in the gym area.
What was that like? How did you get involved in that?
I had one of my kids, his father was a major in the United States Army and was one of the advisors for the military to get, you know, Merchant Marine candidates into various services, because that's the only diverse military school that allowed their members to go commercial, U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, et cetera, and Coast Guard. So that's the only academy that does that, okay? So he had, his kids went to my club in Great Neck while it was going on, and he became involved. He came down a couple of times. He said, would you be interested in, you know, teaching at the academy? I says, yeah, but you couldn't teach. You had to be a volunteer. You can't get paid. And I said, okay, it'd be a good experience for me since I taught up at West Point, okay? And at that time I was getting paid up at the Point for a short period of time, and then I wasn't getting paid because they wanted a military person to be the head of the thing, and they wouldn't pay civilian contractors at that time.
Did they have a team or were they intramural?
It was both. It was both.
Where would you take them for tournaments back then?
Tournaments were all over. Tournaments were different places, okay? And mostly it was fun because some tournaments were overseas, because it was the military games, European military games. And then the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy didn't want to get involved in that, but West Point did get involved in that. So at one time I was, you know, over in Paris, over in England for a tournament, for the NATO games, you know, okay? So we had, but most of the time I was an assistant instructor for the cadets, but I was a primary instructor for the dependents team, which was really just kids, you know, civilian employees or military families that were living on base that wanted to take judo.
What year was that, do you remember?
70 to 73. Okay.
And what got you involved with teaching judo at the Great Neck PAL?
My father was a judoka for a long time. Then he had hurt his back, okay? And he was in the military service, and he had come out. He'd introduced me to a couple of people, and I was taking classes as a kid. And then I hurt my knee for a while. I stopped for a very short period of time, let my knee rehabilitate, and pardon me. And then I started teaching on my own. I opened up my own school with Great Neck PBC at that time. And then, like I said earlier, okay, it elevated into PAL down the line. And I taught at different communities because when one cop heard about it, okay, he said, you know, would you be, you know, one cop heard about it, he says, well, yeah, I have some kids that wanted to do this. Can we try it out? And I said, yeah, you have to drive out to Hicksville. You got to drive out to this. So I had like 3 different clubs at one time. I was working 3 or 4 days a week, plus going to school, plus working at night. So 3 or 4 days a week, I was teaching judo as well as working. And one day a week for a while, I was going up to West Point and back. I was commuting between West Point and New York City for like almost a year and a half, okay, for the dependents team as well as the regular cadets team, okay? And that's basically, you know, like I said, the community was a good community to live in, okay? And we had no hassles, we had very little, if any, crime to speak of that we were involved in. There was a slight clique with the Italian-Irish kids and certain kids where they were mostly like in the fire department and stuff like that and other things like that. But they would get, when you went to school, you went to school, you know, and everybody was cool. You know, there was certain, like I said, there were certain cliques mostly between the Kings Point kids, the Kings Point group, and everybody else.
So when you taught judo, I know you taught judo at both places for a long time, so what was the difference in the community and like who would attend the classes when you started the
We had mostly, I
How did
started,
it change over time?
we started the club where the cop went into the school system, got permission from the school system to put registration flyers within the school system. Pardon me, it was given out to the general population within each public school in Great Neck. So it wasn't just like Baker Hill School, and there was no JFK at that time, okay? It was Great Neck Public, it was, you know, different schools around the area, Saddle Rock School, and everything. But then he gave it out to everybody, so he allowed the whole entire community to come in from Great Neck South, where, you know, the schools in Kensington, okay, Lakeville School, those, you know, the other public schools within the Great Neck's public school system, okay? And they were all invited, and the first class was at E.M. Baker for a while, okay, which was convenient for me because I was still living in Hartley Road in Great Neck, which is like 3 or 4 blocks away from, you know, that area, okay? But when I moved out, I had to commute back and forth between Queens and Great Neck, which was no big deal, you know? And I taught at Great Neck Public School. I gave Baker for a while, then the mats were no good, and people were, you know, complaining about the mats, and they wouldn't bring in different mats. So then I went to Great Neck North Junior High School, taught in the wrestling room for a while, all right? And then I was trying to get into Great Neck North High School to teach in the wrestling room, but they wouldn't let me use it, so I just basically used Great Neck North Junior High School. Most of the kids at that time were complaining, the parents were complaining because most of those kids came from Lakeville or Kensington Johnson, and they didn't want to commute the extra 5 minutes to North Junior High School. So we moved the whole program into Kensington at one time, and then when Kensington got sold off, okay, and then Kensington no longer existed, pardon me, we were trying to move to South. South had too many recreational activities going on where I couldn't, you know, go there the one night a week, okay? So we moved into Lakeville School, and we stayed there for a number of years, and then, like I said, the program itself, the activity itself within PAL and PVC, not in PVC, in PAL, it dissolved because other kids just didn't want to take it, okay? So they wanted to take something else besides judo, okay? So it began to go down. So the last year, like I said, the last year I was here was like almost, I would say about 10 years ago, okay? And that's when we had one last registration, online registration through PAL 10 years ago, and 2 kids registered instead of, you know, so I said, I'm not here anymore. You know?
What backgrounds did your judoka have from comparing from how many, what was like the size difference between when you started in the 70s, who would come, and then when you, on your later
We had
years?
mostly elementary age kids from grades, we wouldn't let anybody in below the age of 8. So we had the youngest child there was 8 years of age. It was a male-female class, okay? So it was a co-ed type program. When the community started changing, when you had Orthodox Jewish kids and, you know, Hasidics, they wouldn't let the girls and boys play together, okay? So I said, no, you can't run a program that way. I'm not running a separate girls class and a separate boys class. And then they wanted a woman there because, I was a man. And I said, no, it's not going to work out. It can't be that way. Okay? I'm used to a co-ed class, and this is the way I'm running. And they said, well, we don't want the program here anymore. I said, goodbye.
So our final question is,
Yes, please.
Why do you do judo, and how has it impacted your life?
Judo is a lifestyle. It's not just a sport, it's a lifestyle, okay? It teaches you self-discipline, it teaches you confidence, all right? It teaches you not to fight rather than to speak up for yourself and not to fight. But it's more, and the way I tell the kids is it's an insurance, okay? It's a type of insurance. Just because you're having fun throwing people around the mat right now in class, you're on a mat, you're in a controlled situation, nobody's out to hurt you, nobody's gonna do anything to you, okay? Okay? But in case somebody does, you can defend yourself properly,
And
okay?
just very quickly, can you describe what judo is?
Judo is a form of wrestling, of American wrestling, but it involves throwing techniques, grappling techniques, arm bars and chokes. It derives from jiu-jitsu, which has many forms to it, okay? Because jiu-jitsu is, most people compare jiu-jitsu to BJJ, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is like a fallacy more, or MMA, which is popular now, okay? It's not boxing, there's no punching or kicking permitted, it's strictly throwing, grappling, and what you do is you want to throw your partner to the mat, grapple with them, try to get them in a hold down, or make them land on their back when you throw them, okay? And that's basically what it involves. There's no weapons involved, there's no striking, there's no alternate styles to judo. Judo is judo. Just like boxing is boxing, but judo is judo, okay? Just like wrestling is wrestling. I shouldn't say it that way, because wrestling is Greco-Roman wrestling and freestyle wrestling, okay? But judo is basically a combination of both freestyle wrestling and Greco-Roman wrestling, okay? All right? And like I said, it involves absolutely no weapons at all, and no punching and striking at all, and punching or kicking at all, excuse me, all right?
Thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciated hearing your story of growing up and living in Great Neck.
Thank you. Pleasure. Take care.